Hi, welcome to the Swapping Coal, What's the Future Energy Mix Forum. I'm Stephen Gan. I'm from Malaysia, Kini, one of the hosts of this online forum. Now, this forum is part of a regional project called Asia's Coal Dilemma, involving journalists from 6 countries: Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, and Australia. Now, 30 years ago, the world came together at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It was the largest gathering of world leaders of its kind. I was there with Malaysia Kini co-founder Pramesh Chandran. Now, it was years before we launched Malaysia Kini. We were then part of a group of global youth who went to Rio with the aim of holding power to account. When it was clear that the Earth Summit was just a talk fest with no real action to be taken to save the planet, we mounted a series of protests. Prem and I, along with a dozen of other young people from different parts of the world, were dragged out of the hall where the leaders were meeting. Luckily, the police did not arrest us. I cannot imagine what it would be like to be inside a Brazilian prison. As expected, the Earth Summit resolved to have a non-binding agreement called Agenda 21. We are already in the second decade of the 21st century, and nothing much has been done since that summit. We have wasted 30 years. Next week, the world will again meet at what I would call the second Earth Summit in Glasgow called COP26. We must have a binding agreement. We cannot waste another 30 years. This second chance is our last chance. And one of the key actions that we must take is to replace coal with renewable energy. Now, a recent study found that if we are to keep temperature rises within 1.5 degrees, we need to shut down 3,000 coal power plants by 2030. That's 1 plant a day by the end of this decade. That shows how difficult our task is. Even if we are to keep to existing pledges on carbon emissions, we will see temperature rising to 2.7 degrees, which means 40 to 50 degrees heat waves in Malaysia within our lifetime, if not our children's lifetime. So to kick off our discussion on this really important topic, let me introduce the moderator of this forum, Yasmin Rasyid. Yasmin is the founder of EcoKnights, an environment organization that aims to empower people to live sustainably through sustainable actions, something we need to do if we are to save this planet. Over to you, Yasmin.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you for the kind introduction. We'll just kickstart our panel discussion today. I'll give a quick short introduction, and what will happen is I'll introduce the three panelists, and each panelist has about 5 minutes each to share some slides with us. So let's start. Now, just recently, Malaysia's new Prime Minister, Ismail Sabri Yaakob, has announced a goal for the country to become carbon neutral as early as 2050, alongside a commitment to stop building new coal-fired power plants. He was also quoted as saying that cleaner electricity generation will be implemented through the operation of several gas power plants in Peninsular Malaysia to replace coal power plants. This was announced when he was actually announcing the 12 Malaysia plan for 2021 to 2025. So a couple of questions came up. I mean, how will this announcement impact the demand for coal and its pricing in the short term? And how will this announcement influence how energy will be generated in non-Semenanjung areas? Are we pushing for more renewable energy sources to be fed to the grid? What sort of economic instruments will have to be in place in order to facilitate this transition? And in order for a smooth renewable energy transition to continue, as a consumer and user myself, I can't help but wonder what would be the impact of energy pricing. Now, with me today, we have three panelists, each representing a sector that is multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder. And we are very privileged today to have their presence. My aim today is, despite the short time, is to get a better understanding of where we are in the world of renewable energy, listen to the opportunities and challenges that they face as a key stakeholder, and we'll also take some questions from the audience to spice things up a little bit. All in all, this session is not the last session on this topic, but will aim to spark and stir more constructive discourse in this subject matter. I personally want to see and be part of a future where all energy we use are clean, does not pollute the environment, is affordable, non-interrupted, and provides sustainable economic benefits to all. Now, without much further ado, let me introduce the panelists. We have three panelists today. Mr. Davis Chong, the Group Chief Executive Officer of Solarvest Holdings Berhad. Mr. Sharan Raj, Advocate of Environment and Climate Crisis. And we have Ibrahim Ariffin, Director, Energy Analyst of the Strategic Planning Division in SEDA. We're going to kickstart with Ibrahim Ariffin, and you have 5 minutes, Ibrahim, to share your perspective and views by sharing your slides.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Yasmin, and thank you also for Mr. Stephen and Malaysia Kini for inviting us to be on board on these interesting sessions of today. So within the 5 minutes, I just would like to share a little bit on the renewable energy landscape in Malaysia. As mentioned by Ms. Yasmin just now, that I would say that the electricity supply industry in Malaysia, Peninsular Malaysia in particular, was developed since the early 1900s. I would say that about 1960s and 1970s. And at that time, the particular interest is, I would say that at that time, the renewable energy is still something a bit alien for Malaysia. And thus, at that moment of time, the system itself is developed in line with the development of fossil fuel generation sources. So I would say like until today, I would say about 80 to 90% of the electricity demand in Peninsular Malaysia are being supplied by the fossil fuel generation itself, mostly coming from coal and natural gas. So this will also raise some concerns with regards to, for example, the topic of today, the swapping of coal. Like coal is also one of the resources that is the most cheapest, and thus able to provide a cheap electricity supply to all. And due to these transitions, careful and cautious measures need to be undertaken to make sure that these success stories will not be jeopardized and all Malaysians are able to enjoy cheap and affordable while maintaining its highest reliability of electricity supply. So with regards to the renewable energy, just a little bit introduction about SEDA Malaysia. We are established back in September 2011, and recently we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and we are the statutory body under the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, mainly to, I would say that the core function is to facilitate and develop the renewable energy industry in Malaysia. So looking at this, I would say that these are the timeline on the RE journey that Malaysia has undertaken since 2001. So if you can see that there are initiatives called the Small Renewable Energy Power introduced back in 2001. And under this mechanism, the resources that we have been explored, mainly on the bioenergy, biomass and biogas, and also the small hydro development. But I would say that after about 10 years of implementation of this program, about only 60 megawatt of capacity has been in operations, and this contributed less than 1% of the energy capacity mix in Malaysia. And lesson learned from these programs, Ministry alongside with other regulators, we have come up with this National Renewable Energy Policy and Action Plan in 2010. And this we are aiming to have at this point of time, we are aiming to have 9% of RE mix in 2020. With the introduction of this policy, two relevant acts has been introduced, which is the SEDA Act. It triggers the establishment of SEDA ourselves. And also the RE Act 2011 is the introduction of the feed-in tariff program mechanism. So from the beginning inception of the feed-in tariff programs, 4 technology has been explored: the solar, biomass, biogas, and also small hydro. And later on in 2014, we have added another resources, which is the geothermal resources, to be as part of the pipeline to develop and explore. And after 5 years of implementation of feed-in tariff itself, we can see that the declination of solar pricing has been about 70 to 80% of the cost reductions. And hence we have taken out the solar from the feed-in tariff programs, and 3 other programs has been introduced, namely the large-scale solar, NEM, net metering, and also Celco. And as of December 2020, we have realized about 8.4 gigawatt of capacity from renewable energy, including hydro. And this contribute to about 24% of the renewable energy mix in the energy mix. So if we see that over this 10 years period, so from the 2010, we only have 1%, and we are able to grow 24% thanks to all contributions from all. And moving forward, we are aiming to have about 31% by 2025 and 40% by 2035. So if we see that the capacity targeted by 2035 is about 18 gigawatt, and compared to today, we are about 10 gigawatt of additional capacity are required to meet this target. So next, in terms of delivering this capacity, these are the 3 key strategies. As mentioned, the first one is to shift away from coal. Currently, we are depending about 50% of our energy mix from coal, and these are one of the commitments that Malaysia has made to shift away from this coal upon the retirement of the plant itself. So if you see that the national utility, Tenaga Nasional Berhad, owns about 60% of the coal capacity in Peninsular Malaysia, and they have also made the commitment to no longer participate in any future tendering of coal projects. So these are the first key, and the second one is to optimize the renewables, and as much as possible, we have a vast opportunities for solar development, but we also try to explore the other sector as well, to provide a fair opportunity for bioenergy and hydro as well. So as much as possible, we try to balance out the mix from both the solar itself and also from the other resources as well. And ultimately is to maintain the system stability, and as much as possible, we want to make sure that the electricity supply can maintain at the highest reliability level and at affordable pricing. And if we see, as mentioned earlier, that fossil fuel are currently providing the 80% of the electricity demand for Peninsular Malaysia. And if we can see that these are among the success stories that Malaysia has, if based on the international resources informations, we can see that Malaysia is ranking quite well in terms of their electricity supply performance. If we can see that we are able to maintain quite a relatively low tariff while maintaining a high reliability, which is this a bit technical jargon, which is the SEDA. This is the interruption duration index. So if you can see that we are able to be on par with the developed nations like UK, France, Singapore, for example, in terms of reliability, whereas our electricity supply is on the lower range. So these are one of the key success stories, and due to this interesting energy transition phase, as much as possible, we want to make it green. We also want to make sure that we can maintain this kind of success stories. And towards this transition from the fossil fuels towards more greener energy, these are the few area of concerns that I would like to personally address, which is one is the stranded asset itself. This is coming from the whole value chain, from the fossil fuel, from the mining sector itself, and all the way to the transmission facilities, which is currently dedicated to several fossil fuel plants. So the transmission facilities also has invested about billions worth of investment, And the question is, if the fossil fuel plants earlier than it targeted, what happened to this investment that has been made? And the next is on the impact to tariff. The impact to tariff is we can see the countries with a high renewable energy resources, that the growth of renewable energy usually will lead to a higher tariff to consumers. So as much as possible, this is also one of the things that we want to minimize. And the next one is on the job security, of course, that the renewable energy also provide a lot and vast opportunity for job opportunities. But this goes back to a specific skills, specific expert matters on the fossil fuel, what happened to their future career path. And next is on the emerging technologies. So as we can see, one of the areas that we can see in terms of managing the fossil fuel is that how we want to make the fossil fuel cleaner. So among the few things that we have been explored, including the co-firing of coal resources with biomass potentials to at least make it cleaner. Countries like Japan, for example, have explored on this since many years, and few of their coal plants already integrated with either few percent or 30%, and even some are already converted to 100% from biomass. So these are the few areas that we need to look into to make sure that the transition will not jeopardize any parties and to make sure that the reliability of the electricity supply can be maintained at high level. So all in all, I would say that the energy transition phase has been identified as one of the main economic recovery post-pandemic. And we can see that there are positive outlook of renewable energy growth in Malaysia, especially with the announcement by our Prime Minister recently to go for carbon neutral target earliest at 2050. And I would say that the growth in the renewable energy sector also will enable the social economic benefits. And based on our estimations, we are expecting to deliver the targets by 2025, about 20 billion worth of investment will be unlocked and 30,000 numbers of job opportunities can be explored. So with this, I'll end my introductions, and this by contact information. I'll hand back to you, Mr. Yasmin.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. That was a very great opening and summary to the renewable energy landscape. And I'd just like to remind Ibrahim, there's a question here from Thomas on subsidies. Just pay attention to that question. Maybe we can revisit his question later. Okay. And now we'll move on to the next panel speaker, which is Mr. Davis Chong from Solarvest Holdings. Over to you, Davis.
Hi, thank you, Yasmin. Okay, let me share my slides. Yeah, I hope we get it. Okay, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks. I'm coming from Solarvest. Solarvest Holdings is one of the clean energy company. Okay, we are one of the clean energy company that we started off as a Malaysia homegrown solar energy company, and now we're actually operating in Malaysia and also Southeast Asia and including Taiwan as well. Okay, let me give a bit of background on who we are. Solarvest is one of the clean energy or solar energy, particularly solution partner that we're providing a lot of clean energy solutions in domestically. We start off in 2012 as one of the very first batch when SEDA. We appreciate that SEDA at that time, we start to launch FIT program, which is the very first solar energy program and I would say renewable energy program in Malaysia to start off introductions for everyone from industrial, commercials and individual to use, start to benefit from renewable energy. And then we move on to introduce all these solutions to commercial industrial segments. And now we also do for utility scale project as well in Malaysia. Solarvest has been listed in 2019 in Bursa, Malaysia. We have about 200 employees now. We're providing all sort of clean energy project from a residential model to utility scale and also to the industrial also. We basically have 3 offices and we also have office in domestically. And we also have offices in Philippines and Taiwan. Okay, I'm gonna repeat a little bit of maybe of what Ibrahim have said, bring everyone back. Where is Malaysia in RE landscape? Malaysia is actually doing very well in growing renewable energy. Our CAGR growth from 2005 to 2009 actually 50%. It's actually outgrow the global growth of the same period of time. how renewable energy adoptions global versus in Malaysia. That time in 2018, we actually see solar in terms of renewable energy composition is about 45%. But that time, we still have not much of utility scales or even commercial industrial adoptions on NEM program is also not much. And I do believe this number actually increasing to about 60 to 70% for solar energy compositions in renewable energy. So this is what we actually seeing the growth in terms of solar energy adoption. And a part of solar energy, a part of playing a very important role to grow renewable energy mix, is also one of the most contributing to social economy, which Malaysia is the 7th largest solar PV employers in the world. We export a lot of solar PV panels to US market and also European market as well. Okay, let's talk about the green revolutions. How does RE mix target for Peninsular Malaysia particularly? So we look at what is in the operations, part of the data that Ibrahim presented, but we look at the peninsula itself, because if we add a whole Malaysia, including Borneo, that will add up a lot of large hydro, so which will actually make the numbers much more bigger. But if we look at particularly on the renewable energy or solar energy, we're at about 6% now, which is about 2 gigawatt in operations. We are going to build ourselves into 31% as the same target just now, before 2025 with the national target. And we're going to build to 40% of RE mix by 2035. Well, how are we going to do that? We're going to encourage more residential, commercial, industrial to participate in SARE program, which we call Supply Agreement and Renewable Energy. That you don't need to pay anything. You just sign an agreement, then you get an alternative supply other than TME to get energy. Then you can use the renewable energy generated from your rooftop. We have also the NEM program, which is net energy metering after the FIT, that you can install on your rooftop and also sell the excess back to TMB as a credit. Other than that, we have LSS1, which is large scale solar PV projects, until LSS4 now, to let all the investors who are interested to invest on renewable energy, solar energy plant, to participate in this program. That we most recently have LSS4 being announced, and which is supposed to be constructed by end of 2023. We do believe that soon we'll have LSS5 as well. Other than LSS program for utility scale, we also have NEDA, which is we call single buyer program, which is about the same model, but they have different mechanisms to do it. It's also a utility scale. So we see more and more renewable energy project being materialized in Malaysia. Okay, out of all this full program, we have green incentives for you to do it. In case you participate in all these programs, you can actually have GITA, Green Investment Tax Allowance, claim the tax allowance. You can also claim Green Investment Tax exemptions from if you're providing services for the green sector. Of course, you can visit MIDA for more information on this. Okay, let's talk about recently, the 12 Malaysia plan. Out of all the Malaysia plan we have recently, we have been through, this is one of the most aggressive Malaysia plan. We see that it will participate in the green initiative. We aim to become carbon neutral as early as 2050. This is the first time we heard it, and we are very welcome and happy finally that we set the target now. We plan to reduce greenhouse gases emissions by 45% based on gross domestic product in 2030. It's also another national target. And also with the introduction of economic instruments such as carbon pricing and carbon tax to start get Malaysia economy to participate in carbon economy or circular economy. So this will make our renewable energy sector to be more sustainable. Okay, I think this is my last slide, and bringing on the vision from Solarvest. We always want to build our world as generated by renewable energy. So over the years, we have been building more and more solar plants, all various sizes, from residentials to utility scale. Out of all the projects that we have built about 350 megawatt peak of solar capacity in Malaysia. And we probably learn about megawatt, kilowatt size. But what do we know about what is bringing us in the environment aspect? This size equally that we're powering 155,000 homes with solar energy. Or it goes that we're planting 14 million of trees, or taken off 42,000 cars from the road annually, or is directly equal, we take away 300,000 tons of CO2 from the environment. And this is why we always say that renewable energy adoption is the fastest way to fight climate change or play off the carbon emissions. I think that's all I have. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thanks, David. We had Ibrahim starting that discussion from the government-linked company perspective, and then we had Davis representing the private sector. And it wouldn't be complete if we don't hear from civil society and an advocate as well. So I'd like to welcome Sharan Raj to take the next session and present his slides. Over to you, Sharan.
Thank you, Yasmin. Good evening, friends. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak today. As a member of civil society, Parti Socialist Malaysia, as a political party, we have worked with Gabungan Darurat Iklim, a coalition of 80 over civil societies. And we have formulated a potential proposal for Malaysia to consider to become 100% renewable by 2035. As revolutionary it may sound, but we have managed to find that it is practical. Stick with me and let me explain to that. But firstly, we need to understand what is energy trilemma. Energy trilemma is where we need to balance three things: energy security, environmental, and energy equity. And they can be extended further into their definition. Historically, right after the formation of federation, Malaysia was reliant on oil, like literally black oil for electricity. And later, after the global oil crisis in the 70s, Malaysia kick-started Petronas and we became a gas-dependent nation. Contrary to popular belief, Malaysia is not an oil nation, but a fossil gas nation. And we have used our gas to build our energy sovereignty, right? But this entire arrangement changed in 1990s when a lightning strike happened in Teluk Kalong. In Teluk Kalong, which caused a nationwide blackout in 1992, which we all know, the biggest blackout in the country. But in fact, it has nothing to do with power shortage. It was a grid failure. But then the Mahathir regime advocated the need for independent power producer, which when we have all the independent power producer, which under the pay and take regime, and they were given handsome amount of a subsidy to sustain the business. Profit was huge. And between 1997 until 2017, the amount foregone by Petronas, because we sell our natural gas underpriced to the IPP, was 240 billion. And so when Najib Razak administration came in, they decided we need to curtail the amount of subsidy given to them. They wanted to sell the natural gas at the global market at higher price and adopt coal, which was cheaper at that time of consideration. And this we are talking about 2009 and 2010. And of course, nuclear was on consideration, but as we all know, nuclear did not take off because the technology was very alien to Malaysians. The cost was very alien. And the technology provider, as well as the fuel provider, nuclear fuel provider, did not want to take the waste. As you've seen in the case of liners, they want to keep the profit, but they don't want to keep the waste. All right. So eventually, civil society punched through and nuclear didn't take off, but coal was silently approved. Within a span of 10 years, Malaysia built 10,000 megawatt of coal within a very short span. So we are the only country who actually moved away from gas, which is cleaner compared to coal, and we moved into coal in a very short span of period. All right. And when you look today, nearly in 2018, nearly over 40% came from coal. And as of 2020, it has become more than 50% for the whole country. Bear in mind, the state of Sabah does not have any coal. And the last coal power plant in the country was built in Jima, Negeri Sembilan, as well as Baligyan in Sarawak. Contrary to popular belief, former Energy Minister Ibrahim have disbanded any new coal and diesel power plant in 2019. So the current Prime Minister Sabri is taking credit for work done by former minister. So I need to get that because this work was put in by her and we were actually quite involved, and she agreed that coal and diesel makes no more sense anymore. Okay, so I have to make the criticism because now everybody thinking Sabri stopped it. No, it was actually stopped a long time ago, but then it was not made as a formal announcement. Okay, moving forward, now when you look at today, how do we actually get to renewable energy 100% from where we are? First of all, will be the energy efficiency. We need to make energy efficiency mandatory. Okay, if you look at industry, this is for tenaga, yeah, barely 0.3%. They make 0.3%, very small, but they consume nearly more than 1/3 of the electricity in the entire Semenanjung. And this is also the case for Sabah and Sarawak. They are really big users. Okay, but then again, we cannot force them to immediately adopt energy efficiency because cost will go up, and Malaysia being an exported-oriented country, pushing up our cost of goods may force us to lose out. And we also have these issues of fair trade, okay, free trade, I'm sorry, where we have no tariff. So pushing us our cost may force us to lose out. But one way when we can look is a lot of this industry, they need hot water. And one of the biggest waste coming out from our power plants are hot water. Right? You're talking whether about the coal and so on. And this hot water, you can actually sell to the industry. They are basically wasted. Unknown to many, even the most efficient power plant in this country, which is the combined cycle gas, only 60% is converted into usable electricity energy. 40% is wasted as hot water. And this hot water, you can actually sell it to the industry by pipelines, which they can use it in the industrial process. Right? And the other thing that we need to look is energy efficient motors. Motors remain one of the most important equipments in the industry. And regulating motors in industry will actually reduce our overall energy efficiency. And when you look at commercial, the bad boys here will be the malls and your office tower. Unknown to many, some of the biggest malls on the planet is actually Malaysia. And in fact, Bandar Utama is the 8th biggest mall in the country. And these guys actually needs a huge amount of energy to cool their space, right? And we need to focus on the building energy index. I have to give credit to former Minister Ibrahim because the building energy index was long been proposed within Suruhanjaya Tenaga as well as SEDA. The policy was that, but it was not put forward. Our bureaucrats have actually prepared the policy a very long time ago, as per my knowledge, but it only materialized during her time. But it has become a not really a mandatory thing. It's become more like a sticker, right? And we have to focus on these big guys. And when we control the malls and office tower, you see significant amount of shift, right? And when you look at residential, we need to look at expanding and raising our star ratings, right? And why I'm saying to make it mandatory is when we look now at the moment, we are incentivizing them. We're saying it's voluntary. But the cost of green equipments, the cost of energy equipments are very expensive because the demand is very low, okay? Because it is not mandatory. But the moment you make it mandatory, it pushes the demand high and it ensures the demand. So manufacturing sector producing green equipment, you're talking about energy efficient motors, you're talking about high efficient fans, aircon, refrigerator, this demand will go up and price will come down. Right? Now there is a lack of projection on demand, so they are not produced and they produce in a small quantity, pushing the price on upwards. We all know about economic escape, and the only thing we need to do is government to make it mandatorized, and commercial will be the first place you need to start because residential, they are using a very small amount and you may put a lot of resources, but you will not get more than 10% efficiency of the overall. But in commercial, all you have to do is knock the few boys. You're talking about One Utama, you are talking about the Petronas Twin Towers, you're talking about office towers in Kuala Lumpur. Specifically looking at the office towers in Kuala Lumpur and big malls, you will have huge amount of saving. It is not your nasi kandar who's actually using a huge amount of electricity, right? Now, the next one will be talking about fuel switching. Yes, stranded asset is an issue, and a lot of these coal and gas power plants, specifically the new one, they were built using people's saving. KWSP is one of the funder. KWAP, the public service pension funds, you're talking about Permodal National Berhad, Tabung Haji, they are buying bonds and they have put huge amount of money there and you can't close the next day. The savings of the working class will be threatened. But one thing we need to look is not business as usual. We need to see of swapping the fuel. according to a research by University Technology Malaysia, UTM, there is more than enough biomass waste from the kelapa sawit, from the palm oil, to be converted into biocoal to displace coal power plant. But there must be a certain refurbishment in the combustion chamber. But overall, it's more than sufficient for us to displace the coal power plant. And when you look for gas power plant, we can look for biomethane. And when you talk about methane, you're talking about the indoor waters, you're talking about palm oil mill effluents, you're talking about your landfill gas, right? And they can be pumped into the natural gas pipeline to be sent to the gas power plant. Now, what we are doing, which is the SEDA mechanism, is that we only buy renewable electricity. So the kelapa sawit estate or indoor water or anybody for that matters, they must bid for a quota and they will be paid for the electricity generated in. And this is quite complex for a lot of this business because it involves technical, it's quite financial, and a lot of these kelapa sawit, they're actually very far away. And they are not connected to grid because they are what we call energy sustainable. They don't really use electricity. So there is no connection to a lot of this estate, right? And just to let you know, the cost of connecting from, say, a rural area or a palm oil mill to the nearest power point entry averages 1 million per kilometer. So imagine if your palm oil mill is 10 kilometers away from the nearest TNB entry point, it's 10 million ringgit just for your cable and wiring. And this is not for your power generators. So the thing now is we have to think about acquiring the renewable fuel instead of renewable electricity. And this will solve stranded asset. This will solve the issues that you need to the capital expenditure, right? It minimizes the capital expenditure because the biggest cost in renewable developing for biomass and biogas is the power generator themselves, not really the biodigester, right? And this will be very good because most of this will come from the rural area. So the funds goes into rural areas, strengthening rural economy for that matters, right? This is the focus should be. It is known as compounding policy, where you make a policy where you benefit more people. Your local lorry drivers will get because they are transporting. And we are spending about 9 billion a year to import foreign coal. Okay, Tenaga spends nearly 10 million a year to import foreign coal. And by end of this decade, because of the rising coal price, Tenaga Nasional will spend 150 billion ringgit to import coal. And imagine if we spend this acquiring domestic resources. That's a lot of money and good proposition to increase our currency. Now, the other thing that we can look at is the net energy metering as well as a grid access for dispatchable renewable. I'm not talking about solar, I'm talking about still biomass and biogas also, which is the most least tapped resources in the country. Solar is doing quite well, okay. But when you look at biomass, biogas, they are not really on par when they're supposed to be for the amount of fuel that we have. Now, let's take example, Saimdabi, one of the biggest landowners in this country. They produce both biomass and biogas, okay? And they can use that to generate their own electricity, feed it into their grid and pull out for their other conglomerate, okay? Unknown to many, Saimdabi owns the biggest motor showroom or automotive showroom in Subang Jaya. And it's actually one of a big space. They use a lot of electricity. So now they can produce their own electricity, transfer it to Tenaga, pay a certain amount, like a toll, and then use it to power their facilities, whether it's their hospitals and so on. Now, when we look at net energy metering, how do we move forward from there? Let's take one Utama. Well, the bad boys here, one of the biggest energy consuming commercial sector. They actually produce both food waste as well as sewage, and they can use it to make electricity and connect to them, power themselves. Okay, any surplus or deficit, they can export to Tenaga. So this becomes another arrangement like solar net energy metering. And why this is more feasible, electricity for the industrial and commercial is actually very high. They are more higher into a certain extent, the premium paid by FIT to sustain it, right? So rather than subsidizing them, rather than putting a increased fee on the electricity to subsidize this renewable energy developer, we open up the grid where big conglomerates, well-capitalized business, the capitalists should come in to power themselves. And there is where things will move forward. There is where you will see things more feasible because they have the capital and the needs, and they are under pressure by environmentalist group to back up. And the last we have to look is grid infrastructure. This is where I talk about solar, okay? Everybody say we need to liberalize solar. We need to open up. No, that is actually very dangerous. In fact, it will do more harm than good. Our grid can only accept a 25% of the maximum demand, okay? Why is that so? Because renewable output of wind and solar, they change according to your season and by second year intensity and so on. And they can damage the grid because you need to maintain the electricity grid at a frequency. Right? So when you open too much, you beyond the critical limit is actually 27, but Energy Commission keeps it at 25 and below as a safe limit. Right? If you feed in too much of solar, you have a nationwide blackout. You may even have some kickbacks where your power plant will have mechanical damage. When I mean mechanical damage, literally a blowout. Okay, so we have to understand that risk, and we have to be careful when solar industry advocates for liberalization. Because what they're saying, they want to feed as much as solar they want. Yeah, because it's profit for them. They want to feed in more. But if we let them do whatever you want, you will get things like what you see in other countries where you have so much of solar and the system cannot take it, it will be curtailed, like in California, in Australia. And Malaysia tried to avoid that. And in this country, stranded asset is not fossil fuel, but the renewable energy. And Malaysia has to plan properly so we don't damage things. And the only way we can move beyond this limit is smart grid. And the smart grid's final say and capital amount rests within the minister's power as advised by Suruhanjaya Tenaga. So some has asked why Tenaga and Petronas is not here. Yes, they are not here because in fact they are not the final say. Final say is always the minister. The minister decides when TNB completes the smart grid, and that matters. Of course, I came to know that TNB asked for extra round of funding, allowing them to invest in smart grid from 2022 onwards. Now, in East Malaysia, the story is very different. It is still grid, but it is very fragmented. In fact, if you see in Sarawak, we have circled 3 layers. All those region runs exclusively on diesel. They are not connected to hydro. There is more than enough hydropower and renewable to actually to power up the entire.
You have about 2 more minutes to wrap up, Sharan.
Yep, I'm wrapping up right over now.
Thank you.
Right? And there has been so much of fragmentation that you cannot bring the renewable power where it needs. You cannot inject solar power because it's heavily fragmented and weak. There has been some development in making the grid, but there is a lot of infrastructure that needs to be done there, particularly at grid before Sabah. In fact, we don't need to build any new power plants. All we need to do is improve the grid, and Sabah and Sarawak can actually live 100% way before Peninsula. And that's all from me. If you have any inquiries, feel free to email me. Right? Thank you very much. Over to you, Yasmin. Sorry for the delay.
Thank you very much, Sharan, for that really passionate presentation. And I do agree with you. There are, of course, a lot of other solutions out there to really keep us using energy efficiently and smartly. And I do get it from the energy hierarchy perspective as well. We can really lock and nail efficiency in all sectors. That will really look a lot of minimizing wastage. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite all the panel speakers back to this forum, because this is where the debate, and hopefully not too heated, pun intended, will take place. And I'll start with a question from Ibrahim. And now, maybe for the viewers' benefit, we have received some of your questions prior to today's session. And what I've done is basically try to mix and match some of your questions so that our presenters can address them here. However, of course, you feel free to also drop your questions in the chat box, and I'll leave it to the presenters to pick and choose some of the questions that maybe you can contribute. At the same time, also provide a bit of clarity. So, Ibrahim, first of all, thank you for the slide presentation earlier and for giving an overview of the role of SEDA and how the organization influences the energy transition for the country. As we see the gradual opening up of the renewable energy sector, and mind you, with the Prime Minister's announcement as well, do you think our local players here are ready or have the right access to support as well as the right resources from the government to grow and scale? I think there is always the fear that the RE sector will somewhat be monopolized with just a few key players. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Yasmin, for the interesting question. As we can see that the renewable energy growth will also unlock a lot of job opportunities. And I would say that this is one of the benefits, like compared to previously, that when we are exploring more in terms of the conventional plants, usually one conventional plant, for example, like a coal-fired project, is a very capital extensive. It can reach out to almost $1 billion worth of investment. And due to this kind of investment, only a few parties that can only participate under this kind of initiative. But moving forward with the starting of mechanism, for example, like the feed-in tariff programs, it enables for participation from the public to engage on the smaller scale of solar projects for as low as few thousands of ringgits. For example, they can already be part of the energy producer itself. So like moving forward, for example, like back then when we give an award of energy award, for example, for coal projects, 1,000 megawatt, only one party can enjoy the benefits. But with the implementation of projects such as the large-scale solar, it enables for more players to be in. For example, like with the recent announcement of the LSS Cycle 4 bidding exercise, with the capacity about 800 megawatt, roughly about 40 players are able to secure the projects. So I would say that this will also provide opportunities and opportunities for the SMEs in particular and for local players. And the other mechanism, for example, like the feed-in tariff and also the net energy metering, this is talking about a smaller scale projects. And with this kind of project, even the residential sector can also be part of the participants. And this has opened up more players for the industry itself. So like moving forward, I would say that under SEDA, we have also a list of registered service provider. And over the years, we can see a significant growth. From back in 2010, only a few players participated under the service provider for solar system. But as of today, we already have 190 local service provider registered under SEDA. So this is a significant growth and provide job opportunities for many levels of the society.
Thanks, Ibrahim. I think it could be very good news for a lot of corporate MNCs that are at our shores. I think many corporate MNCs are also subscribing to the RE100, and I think moving forward, they are also catching up as a race against time. I think by 2030, most of these MNCs are required to use 100% renewable electricity. So I hope that now some positive news in terms of people going into that sector. Now let's move to Solarvest as a private industry entity. I'd like to ask you this, David, like with the recent announcement on our carbon neutral targets and goals for 2040, it's positive to know that, especially with companies like yourself taking a similar sustainability path, it could be very, very positive projection in future for a solar player. But what are the views, what are your personal views as we see more liberalization of the market, and what are the potential challenges that a RE player like yourself would potentially face? And apart from that, where do you see some of these opportunities coming in to allow the facilitation of this transition?
Thanks, Yasmin. Okay, solar is playing an important role in this transition because we are the enabler of the transitions. So we're playing a huge part to be able to create values, that our value propositions to build more solar plants for the players, for the investors, for the business entity that they want to participate or want to build the energy transition plan. So, but we need a strong policy to do that. First of all, I think it's good to see the national targets that being announced. And the next, what are the action plans that according to these targets? So I think in the past that we are grateful that in the past 10 years is a huge growth. From 2012, from FIT program to NEM to LSS program, then NEDA program. Just a bit of comment that from what we've been through, that I think we can go faster, we can go more ambitious than the past 10 years. Because we have built a very good fundamental. Malaysia renewable energy PPA is one of the most bankable in Southeast Asia. Of course, we have very good reserve margin on our grid and energy supply to the national. We have, I would say that we have very good regulations in Malaysia to control in terms of the energy trilemma. But the energy transitions need to be faster. With the national targets that we have now, it is good that how can we go faster than past 10 years? We have been doing LSS program, we've been doing all the NEM program, 500 megawatt for each year. We can do more. The grid can take more. We can enable third-party access. We can do P2P energy trading to let the energy distributions or consumptions to settle their own demand and supply at the distribution level with a certain control, like Sharan talk about smart grid. Smart grid will help on the demand and supply side with policy that fit into this, I would say, technology or policy development to enable more different model of renewable energy adoptions, PPA, P2P energy trading, and it will go along towards liberalizations. End of the day, like all other countries, you know, somebody operate the grid, somebody do the energy trade, and let the market to demand to determine the energy price. Let the market to decide what energy they want to buy. They want to buy coal energy, they want a green energy. Of course, we being part of the green energy player, we do believe that renewable energy will be one of the winners along the way towards a decarbonization journey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Davis, for that. I think my takeaway is that while we have a country target and goal towards carbon neutrality, the key question is how are we going to get there? What is the roadmap for the country? And I think that is an exciting time. We just really, really hope those who are tuning in, if you have the capacity to contribute ideas, solutions, I think this will be a very great opportunity for us to voice it out.
We are looking forward to the budget next week. We are looking forward to the COP26, how Malaysia is going to play a role and to declare ourselves in the international platform. I think that's the two main upcoming events.
Yeah, looking forward to that, Davis. Thanks for the reminder. Now over to Sharan. Thank you for your presentation earlier, and I really like how you address the hierarchy of where we should tackle energy first. So from ensuring that energy efficiency is observed first, then working on to switching to alternative fuel, and of course, improving the infrastructure of the grid. Now, as a member of the civil society and representing Party Socialist Malaysia, I'm curious, what are some of your programs in the pipeline to raise this awareness, at least at the grassroots level, to the relevant stakeholders in the country? How do you do it, and what's in the pipeline?
Right. Okay. Thank you, Yasmin. One of the things that we did firstly was consolidating and working together. There's a lot of great work done by a lot of environmentalists, but we are quite fragmented. And this gave us a slightly weaker voice. So embracing our national motto, which is Bersekutu Bertambah Mutu. So we decided to unite. So that's where Gabungan Darurat EcoKnights came into the picture. And we shared all of our strength and decided to go through it. And we later actually did a lot of research and tried to find out these things, how we, I mean, that is democracy. We should be designing our policy and give it to the country and the politicians for them to execute it. That's the way we move forward. And there is where the first line of coming in. And this is where we found out the biggest issues with our renewable energy was we tried to focus on renewable electricity rather than renewable fuel. And there was less emphasis on energy efficiency. In fact, there has a proposal made during former Minister Yogi to make energy efficient is one of the new fuel, right, as a source of fuel, energy efficient. Every energy that is not consumed is there. But of course, it took a backseat after Lanka Sheraton, unfortunately. So there was some work was done there. The other second thing was data dumping. So one of the things we did was actually, we collected a lot of inputs on national energy over the past few years, particularly on coal. And we've been writing and pushing it forward. And fortunately, at this point of junction, Malaysia Kini wanted to work on coal. So PSM dumped our 3 years of data, our entire coal hierarchy, coal usage, and all of it to Malaysia Kini. And we found that was good because you take a random person, where does Malaysia energy source come? Very high chance they'll tell you hydro. In fact, hydro is actually the least contribution. A lot of people don't know gas, and coal is very influential. So the dumping of this data was actually very influential, right? And over the past few weeks, Malaysia Kini report has shaken some establishment. And few people were named, including the capitalists behind the shipping, which not many people knew, and where are the locations of our coal, right? And all of this was quite interesting. And now you will see a lot of change of narrative. This, of course, educated the people. And now people will start demanding, why go coal? That is the second thing. On the third part, we are writing to build narrative. I regularly write to public media. And one of the things that I write early of this year was smart grid, because PSM projected the quota for net energy metering will be exhausted with months. And at that time, Minister Samsul Anwar defended, saying, no, it will take few years to go. And no, I rebutted him. The statement is still out there. And in fact, Malaysia, PSM got it correct. The quota for net energy metering rooftop came very close exactly when it came. The uptake rate, PSM got it correct. And we told the focus for the government is to push Tenaga to speed up their smart energy grid. Unknown to many, Tenaga Nasional is actually a pioneer in smart energy grid. In fact, Malaysia is some of pioneers in technologies like dynamic line rating, smart metering. My home state, Malacca, was actually the first to get a smart metering 5-6 years ago. And when you look, some other countries like Saudi finished it within years, and Malaysia will take about one whole decade since the beginning of Malacca to finish our smart grid. And smart grid will allow solar to actually boom. When you talk about variable renewable energy, solar to boom, you need that to come in, which is not coming in. And we are worried if smart grid came too late, the solar industry would have died off. The booming solar industry now will die because smart grid came too late. All right? And the government are trying to balance between the act of protecting the grid, reliability, stability, and we cannot inject too much of renewable while compromising the quality of electricity, because we are a manufacturing nation, and
Right.
damage to electricity will damage our entire economy for that matters.
Right. Thank you very much, Sharan. In the interest of time, we have only 5 minutes left. I'd just like to maybe put a shout out to Malaysia Kini. There are really, really good questions on the chat box here. I really want to hear the answers to some of these questions. I really hope there will be some opportunity where they can be compiled with the panelists. And I'm looking at a lot of content here to follow up from Malaysia Kini. And these are really, really important questions coming from perhaps industry players as well as consumers. Now, I'm going to wrap up really quickly before I pass it back to Stephen, and I'll just perhaps float it back to the speakers for today. Perhaps what would be some of the key take-home messages that you would like our audience today to remember? I'll start with Davis.
Hi, thanks, Yasmin. Based on all the comments, all the presentations by panel discussions, we all know that growing renewable energy is a no-brainer decision. Just by when to do it, and decarbonizations and all this race to zero is no longer a propaganda. It's the actions that you need to put it in to fight the climate change. And climate change is not a hoax. I hope that everyone knows that how every degree increase, how 1 degree Celsius increase, that will cause the environmental impact. So with that, then the renewable energy adoption is the best way to do that, to reduce carbon emission. And with the increasing, with the technology advancement we have on not only in solar, in all renewable energy technology, renewable technology, that we could afford to do it. In the past, it's almost impossible, or really in the name of luxury, for rich people, I don't think we can say that now. A lot of homes, you can afford to install solar panels. You can do 0 down payment. You can save. Renewable energy project is a cost-saving project now.
Yep.
So just need you to have the mindset to do it.
Thank you very much, Davis. What about you, Ibrahim? In about a minute or less.
Yeah, I would say that the climate change and sustainability has become the key motivations across the globe and private sector as well. Concerted efforts and cross-sectoral initiatives are crucial in ensuring that Malaysia will be able to deliver our NDC under the Paris Agreements, as well as the national aspirations towards carbon neutral. And as the context of our discussion today, I would say that the power sector is not the only culprit for the carbon emission, as mentioned by Mr. Sharan. This also includes the urban development, the transportation sector as well. And hence, I would say that towards realizing the carbon neutral, concerted effort and cross-sectoral initiative are required. So with this, I would say that the current energy transition plan is aiming to reduce the carbon intensity from the power sector itself to 60% by 2035. And hopefully there will be more reductions can be anticipated post 2035. So my end notes, I would say that I hope programs such as today can contribute towards bridging the expectations of all stakeholders and spur collaboration moving forward. SEDA Malaysia will always open our door for any assistance or potential collaborations in realizing Malaysia aspirations. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thanks, Ibrahim. What about you, Sharan?
Firstly, I would thank Malaysia Kini for inviting me today. One thing that we need to talk about when we talk about climate change is the impact on the ground. There's a lot of discussion about stranded assets, finance, investment. Correct. Okay, I'm not disputing about it. But we need to look about the real people are impacted. A particular community we happening in Pahang. He bought a rice cooker 2 years ago in 2018. The flood came, his rice cooker gone. And the following year, he bought another one. Flood came, he lost his rice cooker. And this kind of repetitive flood damage is causing a huge amount of damage to people. They are losing not only their appliances, they are losing their homes. And the cost of rebuilding is very, very expensive. We're not talking about them. Who's helping out them? We have crop failures. We have fish folks who could not find the fish stocks anymore. And what happens? They are moving to urban, and you have the urban pressure on it. It puts pressure on housing, it puts pressure on the employment. And the surplus of labor in urban area will depress wages. And these are climate effects we are not talking about. There are refugees, climate refugees. They're not coming from overseas. Domestically, people are moving. And you can see the depressed wages, particularly in the Malay heartland. You're talking about Kelantan, Terengganu, where a huge loss in their existing agriculture value. They are coming now to urban. And it's depressing the urban people. So we cannot be in this mindset. Well, the Vietnam's having flood, it's not my problem. No, one day they are going to come here. One day the Philippines are going to be on the boat to come here. One day Singapore is going to sink 8 million people will be forcing their way through the bridge. And we have to think something about it. Are we going to just blast the bridge and let them sink? So climate change is real, it is happening, but what we talk about is the urgency is not happening. And I do not blame SEDA or Energy Commission because they, to a certain extent, are regulators and they work at the space of politicians. They can be override by the cabinet, they can be override by politicians. So people has to force them. I have known good people in SEDA Energy Commission wants to do work, but the question is the people needs to push the politician so that SEDA can actually do exactly what they want to do at the first place.
Thanks.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sharan.
Yeah, it is people power, and I mean, just to allude to everyone, Malaysian population will continue to grow. Because every single child that's born in this country, they are all going to be energy users. I just wish that in the future, my children be using cleaner energy so that we can all breathe a little better. Now, with that, we conclude today's panel discussion. Thank you very much, Malaysia Kini, and all the audience that have tuned in. And I pass it back to Stephen.
Thank you, Yasmin. This is not the end of the discussion. I hope we'll definitely have a lot more of this because it is an important issue. It is, an issue that we all should be interested in because it's not just about ourselves, but also regarding our children. So thank you to all the panelists as well as to our moderator, Yasmin. This forum is brought to you by Malaysia Kini in collaboration with the Judith Neilson Institute, JNI. It is an Australian-based organization that supports quality journalism and informed debate. Before we end, I would like to show a 3-minute video about the journalism that JNI supports. It features Adila Razak, Malaysia Kini Special Reports editor. Here it is.
The 14-year-old boy was only 500 meters from home when they shot him dead. And that was what made it incredibly sad. He was so close from home. His family was asleep. He took his sister's car and went for a joyride with a friend. On the way back, he had accidentally grazed another vehicle. So he drove really fast, wanting to go home, which triggered the policeman. Out of fear, he just continued driving, and they shot at him with a submachine gun. The car crashed at the junction leading to his house, and he was shot in the head. When it happened, police immediately said that they found a machete under his seat. They also said he tried to reverse into them, but it was impossible because it was later established that he was already dead at the time. Fact-checking what police are saying about the people who have died is really important. Giving space for either witnesses or family members to share what they feel isn't quite right about the police story helps to ensure that these cases are not just accepted as, okay, he's a criminal, he deserves to be shot at. It's a story that you report on. It didn't happen to you, but sometimes it gets internalized. I don't think I've ever told anyone that every time I drive down that road, I think of that boy. Yeah. The moment where I thought that I wanted to be a journalist, I was reading the history textbook about the role of journalists, whose work inspired people to work towards independence. And it really made me feel that the work of a journalist can have such a wider impact, and that one person's words can do so much. I'm a Malaysian journalist.